to another episode of Conversations, the show where we have the conversations that maybe if more people were having, our businesses would be moving forward faster. That's a new version of that. I don't know who. I like to see what comes out of my mouth on any given day on what the show is about. It's about having conversations. We might laugh a lot on this episode. It's good. You can laugh and have conversations that are strategic and useful at the same time. And as every conversation is on this show, this is not just a conversation for me and whatever amazing guest I have on any given day. It is a conversation for all of us. So if you are live and in the comments, please pop us a little hello, I'm here. Also specifically because last week there was a problem with LinkedIn and we weren't actually getting the LinkedIn comments. So if you want to just pop us a comment and I'll see if I'm getting comments, that would be amazing. What else? Today, we're talking about empowering ecosystems. What does that mean? We're going to talk about a whole bunch of things, but most importantly, what is an ecosystem? How is it different from a network? How is it different from a community? So we like to throw all these words around. So what do we really
all these words, lots of words. What the hell do any of them mean?
Right? And this is why we have Lenwood here with us today, everyone, to help us understand some of how we can create like a base level of understanding about what an ecosystem looks like from a business perspective. And what does it look like to have an ecosystem that's empowering our business forward instead of just there? Because there is fine, but the whole point of building these things is so that they help us go where we're going. So
there is a bunch of malarkey.
Malarkey, another good word.
I borrowed it from Joe Biden.
We're not going to get political today, folks.
It's not political.
I'm
he
Canadian
uses that word. He uses malarkey.
Malarkey is a good word.
And I'm a lover of antiquated words, and I use them myself. My favorite is dagnabbit. I use dagnabbit all the time.
It just reminds me of like I was actually watching Looney Tunes with my grandpa yesterday. It just reminds me of those days. Things were simpler.
That's the days they come from.
Yes.
Those words come from.
So the good news is on this show, you can use whatever kind of antiquated or new age words you want to use. And we're going to figure out what they mean to us.
Awesome.
So before we get started in that conversation, also, I'm not seeing any comments. So if you are watching us live, just get a pop a comment in there. I'm going to check my LinkedIn as well while Lenwood does his introduction. But I would really love for us to be actually seeing your comments this week because we weren't last week and you had some great comments. So Lenwood, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and why we're having a conversation about ecosystems today?
All right. Awesome. So thank you very much for having me on your program to speak with your people.
My program. It sounds very official.
I'm thrilled to be here. As Tracy said, my name is Lenwood Ross. I'm the founder and CEO of Accelerate. Accelerate is a collaboration accelerator and an ecosystem enablement company. As the name suggests, we are accelerating collaborations so that we can solve complex problems faster. I mean, that's the goal. What else did you want me to say?
Well, I think that's a great place to start because how does this concept of ecosystems play in our ability to accelerate these types of things?
That's great. I love that you asked that question. So the ecosystem is a term that really highlights the interconnectedness of all of us. So we are living in a world that's highly networked. The internet made that possible. And we're becoming more and more networks on top of networks. And because of those networks and the digitization of those networks, things happen much faster in our world. So instead of thinking about a supply chain, which has this idea of linear activity, we want to think in terms of ecosystem, which is really a multidimensional kind of term. And we want to think about how we come together as an ecosystem or a group of companies or people who, or I should say people within organizations, right? Small and large, how we come together to link and leverage assets that we already have to create new value. And when I say assets, we shouldn't think only about things like factories and money, because our skills and talents are assets, and as well as those other things, right? So there are lots of different kinds of assets. Know-how, right, is a huge asset that we want to use our networks to bring together to solve the complex problems.
So let's talk about this, because you mentioned a lot about like solving problems, complex problems, link and leverage things. And to me, leverage is about solving problems. I'm using this to do something, right?
Yeah.
Leverage.
It's a lever.
Right. And we'll demonstrate it for you as well, in case you're not listening audibly and just watching for whatever reason. So I think a lot of this like concept of networking, community building, there's a lot of people talking about it, but I feel like it's not necessarily being talked about in that kind of leveraging capacity, that we're actually using our efforts of linking up people and linking up resources and linking up things to leverage that for a purpose. So when we talk about the why behind we would even bother building an ecosystem, what are some of those things we're looking to achieve that building an ecosystem can help us to achieve?
Right. Okay. So that is a huge question. Great question.
I love to ask huge questions on the show.
You only ask the big questions.
Yeah. I don't ask easy little questions. That's for other shows.
That's for other shows. You get that junk somewhere else. Okay. So, you make a huge point. Okay. Why would we do any of this? And, I'm going to make, the way that I understand these things is by actually simplifying them. Now, a lot of times people think when I'm talking, they think, oh, you're theoretical or you're academic or whatever, but I really am just trying to make it as simple as possible, because sometimes when we get into the practical, we can lose sight of why we're doing things. But anyway, let me just say this. One of the biggest challenges as it relates to networking and why we network is fundamental to how you're thinking about what you're doing. Okay. So if you are networking from the perspective of your needs, your challenges, your objectives, not that they aren't important, but it is going to limit you in terms of how you engage with people. And it's also going to, for lack of a better word, color the nature of your engagement. So just as an example of this, the connect and pitch. When we
Which, if you're watching on LinkedIn, you have probably experienced already today.
Yes, exactly. If you're on LinkedIn, you've been connect and pitched this week sometime.
Yeah. So I think I got 3 today.
It's unbelievable. But anyway, so let me explain to you how what I just described as an inward mindset, a mindset where we're operating from the perspective of our needs, challenges, and objectives, how that impacts your actions. Okay, so I am networking. I'm thinking about my needs, challenges, and objectives. I'm having an inward mindset. When I connect to someone, I say to them, I'm interested in networking with you. But our motive is actually not about that person. It's about what we can get from that person, because we're thinking about ourselves. That's, you know what I'm saying? So the next thing that we do is, hey, let's connect. This is what I sell.
Let's not waste any time. I'm just going to get to
because
it. This is what
a
I
networking
sell.
site. This is a networking site, since the underlying premise is that we're networking, I might as well go ahead and let you know what I have to offer, so you can make a determination about whether you want to have a relationship with me or not.
And
more often than not, it's going to be a not.
That's what I was going to say.
Okay, and
it hasn't been a yes yet for me.
Yeah, and the reason that's a problem, we see people, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people doing this every day. The reason that's a problem is because the power that you have is actually in the network that you build. So if you're operating in a transactional way, so that the end result of your communication with someone is not that they connect with you, but that they disengage from you, they break this connection between you and them, you're ultimately engaging in an activity that over the long term is going to be very destructive to your prospects. Because when you're building relationships, we're not building relationships because we expect to get something. At least we shouldn't be, because we expect to get something from it today. If we don't get something from it today, then it's useless.
Yeah. And that's the transactional
approach. In fact, if I can put it into a business context, there's a concept called customer lifetime value. And I'm sure lots of people have heard this idea of customer lifetime value. And this was the key insight that Amazon figured out very early as they were building their business. They realized what was most important to them was not that they get this one transaction from a customer, but that they build a relationship with that customer, and giving them an amazing experience, creating a sense of trust and loyalty between them, so that they wouldn't just get this transaction, but they would get the transactions for the next 20 years. Mm-hmm. That Amazon realized, they saw that the insight of moving from a world that was not connected to a world that is super connected.
Right. And I think one of the words you used when you were introducing the concept of ecosystems was interdependent. And I think that is something, when we look at just that really transactional, here's who I am, do you need this type of outreach, that's not interdependent, right? Like, you're not actually considering what I need. You're just hoping I need what you have and sending me a message. Whereas when we look at it from an interconnected perspective, that changes things.
Absolutely. And so what we want to do in a networked world is change our mindset in terms of how we operate. I'll save that, my first comment, which is what caused me. My first comment I'm going to save till after.
I was like, I feel like, was I supposed to hit a cue there or something?
It's a very important concept. And so I do want to speak to it. But what I want to first explain is this idea of an outward mindset. An outward mindset means that we're operating in the world, and what we're doing is we're looking at the needs, challenges, and objectives of other people. And we're trying to figure out how we can use our skills, our network, whatever assets we have, to help that person solve their problem. If it happens to be a match, in terms of a direct match, in terms of, I have a direct skill or asset that will specifically solve that problem, that's great. We're going to have an exchange of value. I'm going to sell them my service or product. They're going to give me some money, and that's great for. But I don't want the relationship to end there,
right?
Because that person is connected to people. These are hidden assets. They're connected to people through all kinds of relationships that I might be able to help, or that may be able to help me. So we want to operate from a relationship building perspective, and we want to operate with a outward mindset. What value can I bring to this person or this network? Now, the thing that caused me pause that I want to mention is that sometimes it's our insecurities that dictate the kinds of mindsets that we have. So if, for example, you don't feel that you have any assets to contribute, that might cause you to operate in a way that is not great.
Right.
But the reason why I bring it up is because everybody has something that they can contribute. Let's not compare ourselves to other people. There's something about you that you do better than anybody else. Maybe you haven't figured out what that superpower is, but you've got some skills. You've got some things that you know how to do.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the interesting conundrums of ecosystems as well, is there's like, once you're in an ecosystem and people are seeing that, I like to call it your genius, right? Seeing your genius, celebrating your genius, maybe you're getting paid for your genius. It's a lot easier to believe that about yourself because there's people who are showing you it. But we can't be dependent on that external validation. We need to find that. And maybe it's I don't know, my brain okay, I'm just going to say this example because my brain keeps going back there. I was watching some animal photography show because it's like my husband's favorite thing to watch. And there are these wild boars somewhere, and the monkeys eat the ticks off the wild boars. And so the boars feed the monkeys, and the monkeys stop the boars from getting diseases because of the ticks. And in my brain, this is just always my definition of ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in today's society on LinkedIn, you're not super stoked about being like, I'm the tick eater. And obviously extrapolate this to your own unique genius, but that is actually a critical component of that ecosystem functioning. And so when we can find our critical contribution that we can make to, and this is not for all ecosystems, right? Not all ecosystems need my contribution. The tick and eating scenario doesn't need Tracy's realm of expertise. But when you know what that is and you can slot yourself into the spot, then the ecosystem is like, oh my God, thank God you're finally here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an incredible point. One of the shortcomings of the neoliberal classical market, the market will take care of everything, is that it doesn't necessarily factor in our interconnectedness. And we're seeing the failures of that, on a daily basis as our institutions break down, as our global economy and our world change. You mentioned this thing about ecosystems and interconnectedness. Most people do not love insects. They don't want the world to be overrun by insects, right? Well, it turns out that bird populations are dying. Okay. And when the bird populations start to die, birds eat insects. They love them.
Yeah.
So
I always say this to my son because, like, I'm I'm terrified of spiders, right? If like literally I will squeal when I see a spider. And then usually my husband comes and saves it and takes it outside. But I always say to my son, like, the spiders eat the mosquitoes, and like this is part, so we need them. We need the spiders. So am I afraid of them? Yeah. It doesn't change the fact I'm afraid of them, but that doesn't mean I want to kill them either. I want them to do their job. And if they're not doing their job, I think we shared this, or I was talking to someone about this the other day, how when they reintroduced the wolves into Yellowstone National Park, I don't know if you've seen the video about that, but like they had taken all of the carnivores out of the park, and the ecosystem started to die. And they reintroduced four or six wolves back into the park, and it cut down on the deer population. So then the grasses could grow stronger, and then the river wasn't meandering as much because the roots of the grass were holding it down. And you're like, we forget that we're all so interconnected this way, and the humans are the same.
Humans, one of the things that they've discovered in this climate crisis that we're experiencing at this very moment is not that things are worse than expected. It's really not that things are worse than expected. It's just that they did not anticipate the fragility of the ecosystems and the fragility of our human capacity to adapt. Which is one of the reasons why we are in the business that we're in, because whether you're talking about the transition from the industrial to the digital economy, or you're talking about solving the major global economic challenges that we face as our climate changes, we need to accelerate ecosystem development, because we need to accelerate our ability to adapt. We need to move our global economy rapidly away from fossil fuels. Now, there's lots of people, as soon as you start talking about fossil fuels, then you get people, this science is wrong. You got, what I'm saying? Like, you got the political factions, right? And
hey, I was just at Bill Nye the Science Guy, and he is like, I think the world's #1 proponent for we need to do something about this now.
Yeah, like it really is an existential crisis. It really is an existential crisis. And we have to forget about the why for a moment. Let us just accept that the world that we live in is changing dramatically. We can have disagreement about why, but it's changing dramatically. And the trend is much hotter. And that is impacting humans and every animal on this planet and the systems that support it. So we need to, we really do need to act fast, because we're behind, way behind.
Yeah. Well, I think this is where I kind of come into the empowering ecosystems part of this conversation, is that the whole reason behind why linking up these types of resources, leveraging these types of things. So I'll say, I'm a big Bill Nye the Science Guy fan, and I got to see him, and I was super excited about it. And one of the things, if you guys saw my post, I wrote about it yesterday, but one of the things he said was like, let's change the world. And we like literally have to do that. And one of the things, like, these are the types of things that get my brain just like going, right? Like, how am I going to do that? But one of the things that I also like just happened to me in the past week was a contact of mine on LinkedIn I went to go search for her and I couldn't find her, which I know means your LinkedIn account has been suspended. So I emailed her and I was like, hey, can't find you on LinkedIn. How are things? And she's like, I've been like permanently restricted because I broke some user agreement, but they won't tell me what I broke and all these things. And I said, I know the like customer success manager for LinkedIn. Like, if you want, I can ask her if she can like take the case or like how, at least how it works. And she was like, oh my God, yes. So I messaged the LinkedIn lady. She was like, oh yes, of course, I will help you. And it got resolved. It was a mistake and it got resolved in 24 hours. And it just, for me, like I didn't connect with either of those people for an intention of like doing business with them or like having them transact with me in any given moment. I've known them for different lengths of time. I've built the relationships and I was like, oh, I can use my network to help this person solve a problem. And it was I was like, this is what networking and ecosystems are about, because I don't know what problem I might be able to solve. I'm connected with a bunch of people lately who do vertical farming, right? Like this is something that can help in specific areas. There was this kid at the show on Wednesday who was asking questions about nuclear power, and I'm sure he was like 12 years old. And I'm like, and Bill Nye was like, if you can come up with a safe way to do nuclear energy, like go get it done. Like there's so many different ways that each of us can contribute, but if we don't contribute as a group, then we're not really contributing. And if we don't know where we're going, the destination, then we can't enable those forces to be leveraged in the right direction.
Right. It's a great point. There are people who are natural collaborators, people who are naturally, for whatever reason, open to meeting new people. They're listening to what those people do and, the things that they're interested in and what they talk about. And they're able to help connect the dots. And connectors are really, they're really important in this world. And you know what? I did not think of myself as a connector until someone called me an Uber connector.
And then you're like, oh.
For whatever reason, I have an ability to listen to someone and then just my mind just starts working. Wait a minute. I think I know I heard somebody else say X, Y, and Z. I wonder if those two things are connected. And we make the connection. So actually just being a person who can connect the dots is a huge asset in a networked world. So what you need to do is, just make sure you're using that.
So, because this is like one of my favorite directions to go with personal branding stuff, right? So it's great. It's great to be a connector of dots. What if you're not? What if your part in the ecosystem isn't a connector of dots? Should I try to be a connector of dots?
No. You should not try to make something that is not your superpower. The thing that makes it a superpower for you is that it's easy to do, but hard for other people. There's something else that you do that is your superpower. That's hard for somebody else to do. Just as an example, my administrative capabilities are woefully inadequate. I mean, I really struggle with, the keeping track. I mean, I have to put a lot of effort into doing it. It is not my superpower. Connecting dots, connecting people, those types of things, it is effortless for me. That's how I know it's my superpower. And other people who struggle with it, it's not your superpower. But guess what? Your superpower might be administration. It's so easy for you. But for somebody
I always
else,
say that about the accountants, right? Like, I'm so glad accountants exist because otherwise my accounting wouldn't get
But I want to extend that point. and talk about teams. This is why teams are so important and ecosystems are so important. Teams of teams, ecosystems, teams of teams. It's very rare that, actually, it's impossible for one person to have all of the skills that are needed for an effective and productive collaboration. Number one, let me say this about collaboration. There are lots of people who say I'm collaborating. There are lots of different things. Slack is a collaboration tool, Teams are collaboration tools. Those are misnomers. Okay. Teams is a communication tool. Slack is a communication tool. Collaboration is actually a scientific process. And it is a process that involves I used this word before, the linking and leveraging of assets to create something new. So when we're collaborating, we need a team. Now, that team could be internal to your organization, or that team could be external to your organization. In other words, I'm a sole proprietor, and I need a team because I'm just by myself. So what I need to do is I need to get together with maybe some other sole proprietors so that we can create a team. Now, as a team working together, we can advance a collective effort that is going to benefit one of us or all of us, or we can, do something else. But we can decide that we're going to work together to solve a problem for a larger organization.
And I think this is a great example because Lenwood and I might be working on something. Stay tuned. But so I have a friend locally who has had this idea for a new version of seniors care for, I think yesterday she said like 12 years she's had this vision. And I was like, well, kind of like my background, sales and marketing, I can provide like information in this arena, but one of my skills is like seeing what you have, kind of spinning it around in like a salad bowl and then re-looking at it and being like, what if this makes sense? What doesn't make sense? What is scalable? What is financially viable? What is not? And so last night we had dinner, and like I went through, I was like, this is a hole I see. This is a hole I see. What about this? Hey, what about this? And then we had this whole like brainstorming thing, came up with something completely different. And it was like, because this is my zone of genius, I feel good about making that contribution. So yes, could I charge consulting wise a big fee for that? Yeah, I could. Or I could get dinner. But because I am doing what I'm good at, because I am like being my role within the ecosystem, I feel good about contributing it in whatever capacity. And so I think that's also really powerful if you're looking at, like, if you're listening in today and you're a solopreneur and you're like, well, but who's going to give me these things for free, right? This is like a lot of value associated with these things. And when you have a relationship with somebody and you have a project that they maybe also have a passion about, then like ask them, right? And yeah, if they're busy, they may only have a certain amount of time, or they may only have a certain amount of coaching or something that they will offer. But if we don't ask for, if we see a gap in our ecosystem and we don't go and try and fill it, we're not gonna fill it, right? No one's gonna magically appear in the gap in our ecosystem. And when we do ask people, I mean, almost everybody I've asked is like, yeah, like, how can I help? And I think people, especially like I said, when it's in line with their genius and it's going in a direction that they believe in, people want to help and contribute what they can.
Yeah, that's a great. Actually, you made a really critical point that I'm glad you made, and I want to highlight. And it's this idea of design. we can design collaborations when we know what we need to do in the context of a collaboration. So when we understand what collaboration really is, now we can design, when we have a challenge that we want to conquer, we can design our collaborations to accomplish that. And that's how what we call it design do.
Yeah. Well, and I think I always tell people this, even about their LinkedIn network, right? The people you connect with on LinkedIn, right? Like, what are you trying to curate here? What's the type of conversation that you want to be in? I know, well, I mean, I mostly have this conversation with people about Twitter, but people are like, oh, I can't go on Twitter. It just like sucks my energy. I hear such like bad, negative stuff. And you're like, well, yeah, there's lots of people saying that. There's also lots of people who are sharing helpful things and inspiring things and conversational things. And I think sometimes we forget that we are the curator of that at the end of the day. And this is a thing that algorithms really don't help with, because if you're consuming that type of stuff, they'll think you want to consume it and give you more of it. So you have to actively go and say, like, no, I don't want to consume that kind of stuff. I want to follow these types of people. It's literally the reason why I changed my tagline to speak specifically about a personal value of mine instead of about anything about what I do, because I care about creating togetherness based on uniqueness. If you don't believe that, we should not be friends. We should not be connected. We should not be collaborators. You should not be my client, right? We will run in different circles, and that will be the best thing for us. You are not. And I think too, on this ecosystem, in terms of designing it and curating it, like, by design, it doesn't have all people doing all things, right? This ecosystem is for a specific thing. And so it's not about having all 8 billion people on the face of the earth doing a thing together. It's about saying, hey, I need a thought tornado to come in and like tear this apart. Oh, who knows a thought tornado? I know one. It's Tracy. Let her come in and do that. And peace be with you. Well, usually I won't just leave you, but
very often, we're, I guess I would say, like, an ecosystem and a community are not the same thing. They have different purposes. And we might be a participant in many ecosystems. But what's most important is understanding your value and what you contribute, and then creating designing a network around you that's going to, amplify your message about what you do, and who you are and who you want, and what your values are, maybe what your purpose is, whatever you want, and try to build that network around people who are going to be connected to the people that you want to sell to, or what have you.
Yeah,
you do have to. There is some design to it.
And this is one of the things I always struggled with when I was early on in my entrepreneurial career, and people would just tell you, like, just send 25 connection requests a day. And you're like, and literally the only option they give you for that is to be that like one-way transactional me mindset, right? Like, who are the people I think can buy from me? Let me go and connect with them. But this is very short-sighted. In terms, like, this is only serving you today. This is not serving you into the future. And so when we are talking about ecosystems, this is about being strategic. It's about designing things. It's about saying, okay, what do I need today versus what do I need tomorrow versus what do I need 5 years from now? And if I'm going to need that 5 years from now, probably makes sense to start working on building that group of people who I'm going to need 5 years from now, because they're going to know me 5 years from now. They're going to trust me 5 years from now. And they're going to be more likely to say, like, yeah, hey, how can I help? We keep coming back to this design component, right? And I do think this is very relevant in the concept of empowering, right? Because this is going somewhere I mean, ideally, right? The whole point is for it to go somewhere.
Yeah, if it's not
And
growing,
sometimes
it's not
that,
going.
right. And sometimes that like meanders while you're building it, which is fine and normal. And people move in and out and have personal things and leave and you get new people. And that, I mean, that's just the human working experience. But if we don't know where we're going, and it's more tangible than like, we're going to be the world's #1 provider of blah. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so how are we? What does that look like? Who do we need to make that happen? And all the deeper conversations that I think sometimes in the business realm we skim over because we think we have to get to doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I that's a really good point. It's a fair, you know, there's so, especially for solopreneurs, but even people who are working in jobs, you know, or I should say working for organizations, you know, working in big companies, what have you. You know, the work that we do, we spend so much time, such a huge part of our lives doing our work. It's really a shame if we're doing something that is not at least connected to a purpose or value that we have. So it may not be that you are directly, you know, let's say you have some a value that is, you know, a sustainability value. Okay. You don't necessarily have to work for a green company or a company that is in the green economy, but you can connect that which is important to you, you know, sustainability, to working for a company that is committed to operating in a sustainable way, and use that motivation when you go to the organization to do your work and contribute to the organization's sustainability goals.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so if you have sustainability goals, you should follow Lenwood show People Rising.
So
Shameless plug.
if you're, you know, it doesn't have to necessarily be a direct connection. So that, you know, that's always it. But, you know,
I think that's kind of too like partially a self-awareness piece. If I know that this is important to me, then I can go and look for ways to do that. And I can look for a diverse range of ways where I can do that, instead of just saying like, there's this one way. I must go pick trash up off the beach. That's the one thing I can do to like practice sustainability. And it is a thing you can do. I saw local kids out picking up trash yesterday and I was like, yes. But it's not the only thing you can do. But it does come down to that kind of self-knowing.
Yeah.
What am I trying to do here? So like, yes, what am I trying to do as the bigger ecosystem? But what am I trying to do here?
Absolutely. You know, that's a great point that you raised. And so I do want to share with people a little bit about the journey that I went through, because I think it's really relevant. So I used to be a corporate attorney, and I mean, I'm a lawyer. I do not practice anymore, but I was a corporate attorney, and I had rose to very senior levels as a young person. And I'll tell you, you know, I was doing it because the money was good. And I think corporate, for a while, corporate attorney was like the highest paying job you could have. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the people at the top, they make a ton of money, corporate attorneys.
Yeah.
But I always knew that I didn't like being a lawyer. Mm-hmm. I chose to be a corporate attorney because I felt like I would get some skills as a corporate attorney and I would be able to transition out. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the way that I transitioned, or the way that I expected to transition out, was not the way that I ended up transitioning out. But eventually I moved out of that work because it just did not sit well with who I am and what my values are. Nothing against, you know, people who love that. Mm-hmm. I had to go through a journey of self-discovery to understand what it was that I really wanted to do. Now, most people go through that, and they do that when they're younger. They do it when they're in college. I was just going through the motions when I was at those stages of development. And so many people do that. They're just going through the motions. Oh, I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to go to work and get a job at a big company. And, they're just going through the motions. They're not really discovering their purpose and pursuing work that's connected to it. Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of people out there that'll tell you, oh, that's a bunch of bullshit, that's a bunch of bull.
We do that here. It's fine.
Purpose is a bunch of bull. And, people just need to work, and people just need to make money. And that, it is true that you do need to work, you do need to make money. But I would say now, more than ever, because of the radical transformation that's going on in the economy, there are tremendous opportunities to get learning and move into an area that you'd be more passionate about, you'd be closer to your purpose, and you can make as much or more money.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would say too, like, even from my journey, I was totally a floater as well. I just coasted. Sounded like everyone was like, this is what you do. And I'm like, that sounds good. I'll do that. Andrew is sharing, sounds like you needed to find clarity and you needed to figure out things that were in your control. Yeah, we all
that I can control things.
Yeah, there are things
I can control things. Is I can design things like that. I'm raising that, and I'm saying it emphatically because I think that's a problem for a lot of people that don't feel that they have control over their lives.
Absolutely.
They're just on a treadmill.
And I think especially now too, because we do have like a lot of comforts, right? I have a car and I have a TV, so I should be thankful for these things, right? And you're just like, but we don't think about like, how can I remember? So we moved out to the country last August, and it was because we didn't like living in the city. But before COVID, we both worked in companies that had offices in the city. So you're like, that's just what you do. But once we were working from home, and like I ended up working from home permanently, I was like, well, we don't really need to be in the city. So what could it look like if we went out to the country? And it's cheaper, so you can get more house and more yard and all of the things, and neighbors who have eggs because they have chickens. Right? Wow. You're like, this is cool. And that's not the right lifestyle for all people, but this was something that was much more in alignment with what we were hoping for as a family. So we did. And it has been like hands down a great move. But if we had to commute to the office every day, we wouldn't have that option. And so having that remote work environment empowered us to have a more suitable life for the things that we want. And there's more people who are looking for those things. But one of the things I wanted to share quickly about my journey, and for those of you who know me, you might know this, but like my journey through marketing, like I worked in corporate marketing. Corporate marketing is structured like this, right? You work 9 to 5, you work in the office, you travel to trade shows, that's what you do. And that's what I grew up doing. And then I had Nicholas, and I was like, oh, I don't really want to do, I don't want to travel to trade shows. I had to train new people because I'm like, they're like, yeah, I'll go to Vegas. I'm like, great, because I don't want to go. Right? Like, you go to Vegas for a week. That doesn't sound fun anymore. And we evolve as people, but my services still are marketing services, but they're a different type of marketing service. And so it's not that you have to even totally go outside of the realm of expertise you have. You can use the expertise you have just in a more designed method. Instead of me floating through the marketing industry, I now design how I want to show up from a marketing capacity. And we all have the capacity to do that. We don't. Okay, I'm just going to share this story quickly. It's relevant. I'm coming back to something relevant. Nicholas he's 5. He wanted a watch. I'm like, okay, have a watch. And he picked out an analog watch that he has to tell time on. And so he keeps going around, running around like, we don't have time. I think mostly because we watch a lot of like cooking competition shows and they're never have enough time. But I keep telling him, like, we always have time for the things that are important, because that's actually something I believe. And it's something that I live now, but I didn't live when I was in my corporate life. I did what I thought other people thought I should do with my time. And now I do things that I think I should do with my time. And it's equally contributory to the ecosystem. So there's like a whole bunch of mindsets. We could do a very long show on all of the mindsets that keep us from creating empowering ecosystems. And if you want to have more of those conversations, connect with me, connect with Lenwood. We would love to have those conversations with you. But this is why I do this show, is it opens the door to the conversation. So if you haven't thought about an ecosystem from that interconnected link and leverage to achieve something perspective, then this is your opportunity to look at where am I going? What am I trying to achieve? Who are the type of people? Honestly, this is like 90% of the sales coaching I do. Like, you are not connecting to the right people to achieve what you're trying to achieve, right? This is like pretty simple. You got to connect with different people. It's literally, like, I don't know what else to tell you. This is the problem. And these are the things, right? Like, I don't know, Andrew's got a podcast, right? Where are you taking your podcast, my friend, right? Like, who do you want to have on there? So you're having the type of conversations that are meaningful to you. And I know that you're having those types of conversations. I'm just using it as an example because you're here in the chat. Thank you. But these are the things. What are we doing here? And who says you can't do that and have a full-time job at the same time, right? Like, there's possibilities.
Yeah, there's people of a certain generation that are like, they've got like 3 or 4 things going on plus their job.
Right.
They just have a completely different mindset about, like, you know, that kind of stuff.
Right. And it's like, oh yeah, Andrew, I'll be on your show anytime. Just let me know. These are the things, right? It is that designing, that creation piece of this, where this isn't a show about like, let's just sit back and wait for an empowering ecosystem to land on our lap.
No, that absolutely
friends,
not happen.
Not going to happen. So if you want to feel like you're living and working in an empowering ecosystem, let's end here with some tips from you, Lenwood, on what we can do if we want to find ourselves in an empowering ecosystem, either from a work perspective or a personal perspective. What do we need to do today to start down that path?
That is a very interesting question. Great question. Totally unexpected. Okay, I will say, number one, actually connect with me, because I'm going to be talking a lot more about this. You know, as we're, you know, ramping up and doing different things in the coming you know, weeks and months around ecosystem building. And of course, you know, I am a startup founder, so it has been a journey to get to this place. So some of my profile has been updated, you know, so you know, I'm on my journey as well. I would love to also recommend, I wasn't expecting you to ask me this question, so I didn't have it handy, but
this is how I do. I just drop questions on people where I know you know the answer, but
I want to recommend this book, actually. It's a book, it's called Strategic Doing. All right. And this is a book that you can use to learn about collaboration, what it means to collaborate, and also learn a little bit about ecosystem building and how that works. So I'll recommend that book.
You can also find it on Audible if you're more an audiobook person, because that's how I got it.
It's on audio. I mean, you can, Amazon is the place to go, or Goodreads, or wherever you find your books.
Find it wherever you find your books.
You know, those are 2 recommendations. And I think throughout this podcast, LinkedIn Live, we talked about different things that people can do. Spend some time thinking about what you want to do. Where do you want to go with your whatever career, life, and think about how you design that journey. So that's something that people can do on LinkedIn. Building your network, engaging with people who are connected to, you talked about this, connecting to the people that are already in the ecosystem that you want to be a part of. One of the things that I have always wanted for my career is to be in the innovation ecosystem. Like, I want to be in that ecosystem, and I've finally gotten there, but it was,
and this is the thing too, like
it was a journey.
All of this is a journey, right? And I feel like a lot of times we hold ourselves to like, oh, I should have been there already, but there's a journey we need to go through to even know that that's where we're going, right?
Yeah.
Because Lenwood, you mentioned a lot of people go through this conversation, and like, honestly, no one prompted me about this in school, in university, right? Like, I floated around. It would have been really cool to have one person ask me, like, what would you do? Because I would have had to start thinking about what I would do much sooner. And now I feel like I have a skill for that, to know maybe not what I would do, but that's not what I would do. So let me try something else and figure out if that's what I would do or not. But that is a journey, and and this is the thing too, where you get to, these are things I would say to pay attention to, these moments when you're like, finally, I'm where I feel like I was going, right? Just pay attention.
Where I wanted to go.
Right. Or maybe you didn't even know, like, you wanted to go there, but you feel like you have arrived. Or one of the things Sarah Beth said last week on the show was flying. Right? You feel like you're flying. And these are the types of feelings and emotions we can tap into to say, like, okay, yeah, I'm in the right spot, or I'm in the wrong spot, and let's readjust, because it's not too late to redirect your river.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you're saying is, I mean, they're excellent points. Pay attention to what your emotions are telling you. I was crushed by dissatisfaction. So I had to make a radical change. But I would say, if you can, try to avoid that. Try to do a bit better with designing.
It's possible to make small pivots and not gigantic pivots.
And not gigantic pivots, yeah.
And not that
gigantic pivot is not for everyone.
Right. And you can make a gigantic pivot. If you feel like that's what you're being called to, highly recommend it. I also did it. But when we have these types of conversations, it gives us those glimpses into, oh, maybe there is a small pivot I can make that will make these things feel more aligned, more empowering. And even having that confidence to say, like, wow, I took away from this and I was going to like audit my ecosystem and see what my ecosystem felt like. And I'm really disappointed. This is great, right? Because you have more information than you did before. So now you can make a different decision. You can start to build a ecosystem. You can look at what is feeling disempowering about it and readjust. Have a conversation with Lenwood. Have a conversation with me. This is the last thing I'll say because we're running out of time. Find a thought partner for this, because I know, so specifically for me, I'm an auditory processor. I process my thoughts much better when I get to talk and like not have to answer something, but I can explore through talking. And literally without my crew of people who allow me to be that, I have no idea what I'm doing or where I'm going. And so look at what works for you. Are you an auditory processor? Find a thought partner you can talk about it with. Are you a journaler? Write it down. Get your thoughts out, right? Like get processing.
Yeah,
and if you can get processing, stay processing. Because as we both said, this is not a 5-minute exercise, unfortunately. This is a journey. we go through, and the ecosystems we want at different parts of our lives, at different parts of our career are different. So we have to keep practicing the skills. So thank you for coming to this conversation today.
My pleasure.
It is the opening of the doors for everyone to start exploring what their ecosystem looks like. And I highly encourage all of you, connect with Lenwood. You won't be disappointed. Check out his People Rising show, which is also on Fridays. So you could be watching a lot of LinkedIn Lives on Friday, but that's fine, right? Who needs to work on Friday? Just hang out on LinkedIn Live with us. Thank you, Andrew and Brian, for getting into the chat. You guys shared some awesome things. I didn't get to pull all of them up. I'm going to pull this one up quickly from Andrew because it's really resonating with me, even though we've moved on from that part of the conversation. But we always have control of our own narrative. It just takes us time to figure that out sometimes. I think it's a great takeaway from the show, and equally relevant. We always have control of our ecosystem. It just takes us some time to figure that out sometimes. So make yours empowering. And if you need help doing that, connect with Lenwood, connect with me. We would love to get in more conversations with you about empowered ecosystems. Thank you so much, Lenwood. Always a pleasure to chat with you, my friend. Until next time, everyone, permission to do you.
Take care.